Welcome to Humber's Numbers. I'm Rose Humberstone. In this video, we'll be comparing fractions. This is part of Level 7 Number and Algebra, Real Numbers, of the Victorian Curriculum, code VCMNA242. In this video, we'll focus on fractions. I'll be introducing fractions, looking at fractions on a number line, equivalent fractions, and simplified form. So a fraction is a number that is not a whole number, but represents part of a whole. It consists of one whole number, the numerator, which we put on the top, and then another whole number, called the denominator, which goes on the bottom. The denominator tells us how many parts the whole is divided into, where the numerator tells us how many parts we have. So in this example here, we have a rectangle divided into 4 equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, giving us our denominator. Then we have 3 parts shaded, 1, 2, 3, giving us our numerator, 3 on top. That is, 3/4 of our rectangle has been shaded. We can put fractions onto a number line to see their relative position. So normally, when we've seen number lines in the past, we have 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Our fractions will occur in between those spots. So for example, a half will be halfway between 0 and 1. A quarter is halfway between 1 and 2. 3/4 is halfway between a half and 1. Or we could be dividing things up into thirds. So since 1 is the same as having 3/3, dividing between 1 and 2 into thirds, I'm going to have 4/3, 5/3, and 6/3. So we could put all of our fractions onto a number line, which will allow us to see where they fall relative to each other. Another way of seeing where they fall relative to each other is to look at fraction walls or to calculate equivalent fractions. A fraction wall allows us to see the relative value. Now this is just part of one. So at the top I have my whole, let's call it 1, and then I can split that whole into halves. I could also split the whole into thirds, or quarters, or sixths. So you can see that a sixth is less than a quarter. You can also see that 2/6 is the same as a third. Or you can see that 2/4 is the same as a half. When we see that two things are the same, like 2/4 is the same as a half, we say that they are equivalent to each other. In general, we say two fractions are equivalent if they're on the same place on the number line, so a half equals 2/4. To find an equivalent fraction, we multiply or divide the numerator and the denominator by the same non-zero whole number. So for example, we can find 3 equivalent fractions for 6/8. For example, I could multiply both 6 and 8 by 2. So I could have 12/16. That's from multiplying by 2. Or I could multiply by 3. 6 times 3 is 18. 8 times 3 is 24. Or I could divide both numbers by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. A simplest form of a fraction is obtained by dividing the numerator and the denominator by their highest common factor. That's what we just found here. So 3/4 is the simplest form of the fraction 6/8. 6 and 8 have a highest common factor of 2, so by dividing by 2, I was able to obtain the simplest fraction. Note that 3/4 cannot be further simplified, so I do know that I've got the right answer. Alright, now that I've done an example for you and gone through an introduction to fractions, it's your turn to have a go. So here are 4 questions for you to have a go at. If you get stuck, remember you can rewind the video to rewatch parts that you're unsure of. I would suggest you pause the video now, have a go at these questions, and then press play when you're ready to check your answers. Okay, the first question, you need to draw a number line marked in units from 0 to 2 and place markers for these fractions. I'd suggest you rule a line if you've got a ruler handy. So I'm going to have 0, 1, and 2. So a quarter, well, that means I need to divide into half. So a quarter will be here, and 3/4 will be here. I then need to find 2/3. So that would mean dividing into 3 parts. So 2/3 would be here. 5/3, well, 3/3 would be 1. So that would be 3/3, 4/3, 5/3. And then lastly, 3 on 2. Well, 2 on 2 would be 1. So 3 on 2 is here, halfway between 1 and 2. All right, question 2. I need to list 4 equivalent fractions for the fraction 10 on 15. So if I multiply 10 and 15 by 2, I could have 20 over 30. If I multiplied it by 3, I would have 10 times 3 is 30, and 15 times 3 is 45. If I multiplied them both by 10, I would have 100 over 150. So they're 3 equivalent fractions that I get by multiplying by 2, 3, and 10. I could also divide by the highest common factor, which is 5, to give me 2 over 3. So there are 4 possible equivalent fractions. Notice that you might have had other ones. For example, you might have multiplied both numbers by 5 or by 1,000. Question 3. Reduce the following fraction to simplest form, 45 over 65. Well, I need to look for the highest common factor, and I think it might be 5. If I divide both by 5, well, 45 divided by 5 is 9, and 65 divided by 5 is 13. Notice that 9 and 13 don't have any common factors, so that means I've got the right answer. All right, now, question 4 does involve a little bit of work. We've been asked to find equivalent fractions to help us order the following fractions. So what I need to do is I need to rewrite each of these with the same denominator to allow me to order them easily. Looking at the denominators, I have 3, 4, 6, 12, and 8. So the highest common factor of those numbers is 20. Looking at the denominators, 3, 4, 6, 12, and 8, I can see that the lowest common multiple is going to be 24. So I'm going to rewrite each of these fractions with a denominator of 24. So 2 over 3, writing with a denominator of 24 means I'm multiplying by 8, so I have 16 over 24. A quarter, that means I've multiplied by 6, so I have 6 over 24. 5 over 6, I've multiplied by 4, so I have 20 over 24. Then I have 7 over 12, so I've multiplied by 2, giving me 14 over 24. And lastly, 5 over 8, I've multiplied by 3. So that means I have 15 over 24. Now I can look at each of them and order them. And we'll order them from smallest to largest. So my smallest would be 6 over 24. So that means a quarter is my smallest. Next, I would have 7 out of 12, since that's 14 over 24. Next, I would have 5 over 8, which is equivalent to 15 over 24. And then 2/3, which is equivalent to 16 over 24. And then lastly, 5/6, which is equivalent to 20 over 24. Well, that's the end of this video. I hope that you join me for my next video on adding and subtracting fractions. In the meantime, If you're still confused, make sure you do rewatch the video and try some extra examples to make sure you really grasp these concepts.